Hey there, and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete, and today we complete episode 48 of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. Now, in the last episode, things got a bit stressful out here in the desert. The steakhouse was attacked first by a siege and then by 2 separate raids from enemy tribespeople, both of which sent 3 separate groups of attackers our way, and all of that happened in the span of more or less one in-game day. Still, somehow we survived and our colony is slowly recovering. Thankfully, we did not suffer any casualties and all injuries have also healed already. However, as you can see, there is a bit of repair and cleanup work still to be done. All in all though, I would say that our newly constructed kill box did serve us nicely in the last episode. Yes, there might still be some room to improve the design, especially considering the rather steep firing angles of those turrets in the back. But nonetheless, the design did endure its first real stress test, so let's hope that it produces equally favorable results going forward. Also in the last episode, while we watch a rather uneventful first day here pass us by, we received the good news that Edmo and Pollyanna have gotten back together, and at least for now, there is no reason to assume that this time things are not going to last. And with that, we are already about to conclude our first day of today's episode, but not before Jake goes on a very much expected mental break. In the last episode, he unfortunately lost his sister as part of one of those raids. He also already suffered a mental break because of that, but because he was needed in the next fight, we had to put an early end to that, and so we briefly imprisoned him. That has now pushed his mood down even further, so he's now going on a smoke leaf binge, which I don't think is going to be that much of a problem, to be honest. After all, our supply is rather limited. Heading off to bed then also already brings his mental state to an end, and with that the benefits of catharsis set in, which should hopefully prevent things like this from happening again anytime soon. On the following morning then, we are putting down the last few hidden wooden tiles on our hydroponics farm, once again just to keep that beauty rating in the neutral zone, and a little later we have to reposition our deep drill for the first time in quite a while, as Alistair's record-setting mining efforts have stripped the underground deposit empty in no time. In the afternoon then, pretty much all of our repair work is finished, and so we can now focus on constructing new stuff, starting with the highly anticipated installation of 2 autocannon turrets. With a price tag of 350 units of steel, 40 units of plasteel and 6 components, these are certainly not cheap, but they will undoubtedly boost the defensive capabilities of our kill box by quite a bit, and so I think this investment is well worth it. Our current design has room for a total of 6 of these, all aimed directly at the kill box entrance, and over the course of this episode we will likely construct a few. We also have good news from the research labs where Troy has unlocked recon armor. However, this is only the first tier of powered armor that we can unlock, so let's continue straight away with marine armor, which is, at least protection-wise, a direct upgrade. And just because we have a bit of stuff lying around, let's also call in an Imperial trade caravan. No, they will of course not be able to buy everything that we have, but we definitely need to clear some storage space and ideally also bring our colony wealth down a bit in the process. At the moment we simply have a few items too many lying around that we are likely never going to use, and not only does that take up valuable storage space, it also makes our colony a bit wealthier than it technically needs to be. Now, as another night passes by, I also want to quickly mention that we are not going to take the Hard Prisoner quest here. Your comments on the last episode were very clear about this. Most of you did not want to expose the colony to any additional risk at the moment, and I have to agree with that, especially considering the rather lackluster rewards here. And that decision seems to pay off on the next morning, as the steakhouse is attacked by a manhunting group of 26 grizzly bears. Now, of course, we could once again leave this to our kill box, but we are pretty likely to lose the occasional trap or turret that way, so instead we are sending out a small welcoming party here. Of course, we will not leave them in the fight for too long and retreat before things get dicey, at which point we are then sending out our second force of Carl, Steak and Pollyanna. Now, in this first stage of the fight, things are progressing fairly slowly, but we have now successfully split the group of bears into several smaller, more manageable parts, which should make it much easier to take care of them with these peekaboo tactics. And so it doesn't take long until we register the first kill, although we still have 25 more to go. But if we keep at it, then I'm pretty sure that we will ultimately succeed, even though it might take some time. As you can see, our kill box does also at least serve a bit of a purpose, as that first area with the sandbags does a great job of just keeping the bears engaged running around, while they are progressing so slowly in any direction that they can basically be considered trapped for the moment. Not to mention that this also does a great job declustering our enemies, and the effects of that can be seen right here, as we have many bears approach us in a neat line one after the other, which makes it rather easy to take them all down. Now, despite our best efforts, a tiny number of bears does actually make it into our proper kill box, but there is no need to turn on the turrets for them. At the end of the day, we have guns and they don't, and that should be enough. With the last few bears, we then actually have to play a bit of a waiting game. As you can see, it does take them quite some time to find their way back out of our corridors, and once they eventually do, they do not necessarily receive a kind greeting. Still, we have now managed to defeat the threat, and with that the steakhouse is once again a bit bloodier than before, but most importantly, it is safe again. And so, as we expect an influx of dead bears into our freezer, we can already have Troy do some more chopping. After all, you can never have enough food, even if it's just for the animals. Speaking of food, I have actually been paying very close attention to our rice supply, and it does indeed appear as if 3 rows of 7 hydroponics basins each is enough to feed 8 colonists. However, we might also be cutting it dangerously close doing so. So I think we will soon repurpose one of the cotton rows to grow additional rice. With all of our sandbags already built and with our alpacas providing a steady income of wool, I think we can afford to decrease our cloth production a tiny bit. Now, on the next morning, we can watch Pollyanna as she finishes the second autocannon turret. Just like our regular turrets, these are of course hooked up to our power switch and will therefore not be running at all times. A little later, Steak's recruitment inspiration then expires, and I don't think I actually mentioned that in the last episode, where we had plenty of opportunity to use that, but simply put, there just weren't any suitable candidates among the fallen, and so I saw no need to force things. Also, animals going mad seems to be the theme for today's episode. This time though, it is only a single iguana with the taste for human flesh, which by the way also reminds me that we still have that enemy mortar camp, and that we have not yet grabbed all of the goods lying over there. In the meantime, the men and women who once occupied that camp have now been stacked up very neatly inside of our old kill box. In total, our hauling animals have collected 57 enemy bodies here, which Carl can now burn to ashes. In my opinion, for enemy numbers of this scale, this is a much faster approach than to manually incinerate them. And keep in mind that these are only the enemies who actually have made it into our base. Anyone who did not breach our perimeter will be left out there, as those bodies will not be frequently seen by our colonists, and therefore they are less likely to cause any mood penalties. The lone iguana, by the way, has also slowly but steadily made it over to us, but of course it doesn't stand much of a chance against a heavily armed Pollyanna. In the afternoon then, Edmo is the next colonist to receive an inspiration, and this one is actually a pretty powerful one, as it will make the next item that he creates be 2 quality levels higher than it usually would be, and Edmo is already a pretty talented craftsman, so there is a good chance of obtaining some masterwork or even legendary stuff here. Before we decide what to make though, just a quick side note, I have brought over that mortar from the enemy campsite, so now we have 3, which should provide us with adequate long-range firepower. Edmo, meanwhile, is going to use his inspiration to make us an assault rifle. Yes, I know there might be better weapons out there, but as a general-purpose gun that also works nicely in our killbox design, this is a very good choice, as it is much more versatile compared to the minigun, which we are really only using in those heavy encounters, while it still maintains a bit more range than our heavy SMGs, which makes it very useful in those killbox situations. In the evening then, as requested, our Imperial trade caravan arrives, although it does take them quite some time to finally reach our base. For the next episode, I might actually install another small mod for this, because I really don't like how trade caravans seem to continuously hang out to the north of the base, and don't get me wrong, I am perfectly fine with them staying outside of our perimeter, but the east or the south side of the steakhouse would be much more suitable, as those are much closer to our storage room. In any case, for today we'll have to live with it, and of course it doesn't stop us from moving a few items around. Now, as expected, we are not really able to sell much of the captured enemy loot here, but we have enough flake to make up for that, and so we can still afford to grab ourselves a good quality charge rifle. Once again, this is a very good general-purpose weapon and in many cases much better than the assault rifle. Yes, it lacks a bit of range, but we don't always need that, and at least at the moment we still can't make any ourselves. Now, in the early morning hours, we receive another quest here, and I had really hoped for something that would give Steak those last few points of honor he still needs, but unfortunately it looks like this isn't it. As a matter of fact, I don't find any of the rewards here terribly intriguing, at least not to a degree where I would be willing to once again send out more than half of our colony to take on 14 enemy pirates. So we are going to say no to this one and once again watch another day begin, a day that begins with the construction and subsequent loading of a transport pod. As we were, as expected, unable to sell off all the unnecessary items that we are currently stockpiling, we are now going to launch Red Hawk over to our friends of the Black Troska tribe, who should hopefully find a better use for some spare furs and a plethora of unwanted weapons and clothing items. We are also going to sell our 3 Labrador puppies. As long as they are small, they fit nicely inside of the pod as well. Now, loading all of that takes us all the way to the afternoon, but eventually the pod is ready to be launched, and so, just as the Imperial caravan leaves, our trader Red Hawk arrives at the gates of the Black Troska tribe. And for a change, we are only doing some selling this time. You may have noticed that there are actually 2 colonists for sale here, but both of them had their issues, so we are sticking to the silver instead. And while Red Hawk now makes her way back to the steakhouse, Edmo finishes his task in the workshop, and as I had hoped, he has created a masterwork assault rifle. Engraved on it, we can see the birth of a new Labrador retriever, with a dancer watching from a distance and an outlaw floating in the background. In any case, it appears to be a lovely design, and commemorating those dogs that we just sold is a nice touch as well. Of course, Edmo now receives the privilege of wielding this assault rifle, while Steak quickly switches from that normal quality charge rifle to the good quality one we just bought, with the spare one then going to Pollyanna. And so another night begins. Red Hawk unfortunately does not make it back to the steakhouse before nightfall, so she spends a night out in the desert. Still, despite, or maybe even because of her absence, we have good news on the next morning, as Edmo and Pollyanna have officially become engaged. So it does seem like the 2 of them are serious this time, but a lot can happen until they actually go through with it. I do believe though that it would make for a very fitting end to Edmo's sometimes rather tragic arc in this series. Up next then, as a rainy thunderstorm sets in, we finally have to move our mining outpost again, as Alistair has completely stripped the other one clean. Just in that moment, Red Hawk also makes it back to the base, and while we are on the topic of mining, we can have her do some work as well. After all, she did arrive right next to that steel meteorite that crashed down a few episodes back. Since Alistair's new mining spot is then actually outside of our exterior walls, we are giving him some rudimentary protection here, just enough so that he isn't completely exposed. In the meantime, the rain has done a great job washing away most of the filth around the base, and with the return of Red Hawk, fieldwork is also picking up again. In the late afternoon, we also have a group of traders pass by, but it takes until the next morning, rain still going strong, that we actually engage them. And we are selling off a bit more flake and weapons here in exchange for all the silver and components that these guys have. It's not much, but certainly much more useful to us than weapons that we are never going to fire. I then also had perfect timing pausing the game in this moment here, as lightning strikes the base and a small fire breaks out, of course though nothing that we can't handle. And with the thunderstorm still going, you can now see that we are sowing out something a little different over on the right side here, because yes, I have decided to switch things around a bit and increase our rice production somewhat. So both on the left as well as on the right side, we are now growing rice in the hydroponics basins at both the top and the bottom, while our cotton production will be reduced to only those rows in the middle. That way we not only have a nice mirrored symmetrical design, but we should also produce enough rice for our colony to live comfortable for the foreseeable future. A few hours later then, Edmo receives yet another inspiration, this time a shoot frenzy, just like Pollyanna. Who knows, maybe she has rubbed off on him. In the afternoon then, the sky is clear as we are in the process of constructing 2 more autocannon turrets. Arguably even more important than that though, our killbox finally looks nice and clean. We do not quite manage to get those turrets up and running on this day though, but on the next morning you can first see Pollyanna finish one of them, and then a little later Jake takes care of the other one. While he's doing that, we are also busy constructing a few more things here, namely a small weapon storage room right next to our killbox. This is where we will eventually store weapons like EMP grenades, regular grenades, Molotov cocktails, or also that minigun, just to have them a little bit more accessible right where we usually need them. In the process, Steak actually creates a masterwork wooden shelf here, and while we could now move that to a more fitting location, it still only has a beauty rating of 2, so I think we'll simply leave it here. Just a few moments after that, another Imperial trade caravan arrives, and in the early evening, after our construction project has made some progress, they finally arrive at the base. And just like the first Imperial caravan that visited us, they also have a charge rifle for sale, and just like last time, we coincidentally have enough flake to pay for it. So as the sun slowly sets across the desert, we are adding another one of these to our arsenal, and then we wait for another night to pass. The story of the next, and for this episode final day, is then quickly told. First, we are starting things off with the construction of a flat-screen television in our hospital, which, as far as I know, is usually not enough to keep a patient's recreation meter fully filled, but it is not completely without any effect either, so if we have someone in here who is going to spend a lengthy amount of time in bed, this should keep them at least moderately happy. Around noon then, bad news for all females in the steakhouse, as a high-intensity psychic drone strikes our base, and especially for Pollyanna, with her low mental break threshold, this means another mental break is more than likely. Still, at least for the time being, she is holding herself together, and checking on the progress of our small armory, we can see the shelves are already being filled. Now at this point I want to mention that we are of course not going to store all of our good weapons up here. After all, one poorly placed drop pod attack could render this entire room inaccessible, so we are definitely going to keep some spare guns in other places around the base as well. And so, as yet another night sets across the desert, our base has once again become a bit more defensible. For a change, things are also actually looking quite clean at the moment, although knowing this game, that is hardly going to last. Now, at the moment, I am really only waiting for Steak to finally be able to gain those last few remaining points of honor for him to advance to the rank of Count, so until that happens, it might look like we are not really making that much progress. Especially in today's episode, we had plenty of those little things that have now made the steakhouse just a tiny bit more prepared, and I really hope that in the next episode we can take that next step towards finally finishing things. In the meantime, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut for today, so as always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.